Welcome to tonight's webinar, everybody. My name is Ellen Goldberg. I'm from the Hunt, and this is the Solarize Mass Plus for Solar Hot Water webinar tonight. I will give you a brief introduction. I'm going to hand it over to our presenters. So, brief introduction. If you're not familiar already, the Solarize North Shore campaign is a collaboration between the Hunt, Salem, and Swampscott. We've gone through a vetted competitive bid process for 3 different technologies: that's solar PV, air source heat pumps, and solar hot water, which is our presentation tonight. This campaign is run by community volunteers or solar coaches and teams in collaboration with MassCEC, which is the Mass Clean Energy Center. We are having a special end of program Solarize incentive while supplies last. Anybody who is attending one of these webinars is entered into a drawing for a bottle of local wine. If you schedule and have a site visit, whether that is physical or virtual, you will get a $50 gift card. And if you sign a contract by the end of the campaign of May 31st, you will also get a $100 gift card. Of course, this is while supplies last, but we hope that everybody here will be able to get something from that pot of incentives. A little bit of housekeeping. This is a 1-hour webinar, roughly. Everybody is muted. You can type your questions into the chat, and we will try and get to as many of your questions at the end of the presentation as we can. Again, this campaign is ending on May 31st. A recording will be available on solarizenorthshore.org, and if you need to reach me, I'm Ellen Goldberg, and that is my email right there, ellenshainagoldberg@gmail.com. And we have 3 presenters tonight. One is me, who I'm just about done speaking. We have Lisa Dobbs from MassCEC, and I have John Moore from New England Solar Hot Water. And we're going to toggle screens real quick. And Lisa, I'm going to stop sharing, and why don't you share your screen and go through your presentation. And unmute yourself. You're still on mute. There we go. And
all right. Now I've unmuted myself, and all right, finally.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
I did things in maybe not the right order of operations there, but all right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ellen. Really excited to be here tonight. Just going to talk really quickly about the Solarize Plus program and solar hot water incentives before kicking it off to John from New England Solar Hot Water. So with that, like Ellen mentioned, I'm with Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, or MassCEC. A quick background on us: we are a quasi-state agency created by an act of legislation, and we gain our funding from the Renewable Energy Trust. That's that small surcharge on ratepayer utility bills. And with that, we're tasked with doing a lot of things for the clean energy economy in Massachusetts, and also trying to help meet the Commonwealth's climate and clean energy goals. Put up this slide here just to give you a sense that we're pretty multifaceted, whether it be investing in innovation infrastructure, technology development, workforce development like our internship program, or even investments in new companies. But one of the focuses that I really love about our organization is being face-to-face with consumers and communities to help drive adoption and education around these clean energy technologies. So that's where Solarize fits into this whole mix. So Ellen did a great job of explaining the program, but just on a very high level, like she mentioned, it's all about the collaboration and the partnerships between all of the different players. MassCEC administers the program and offers funding and education. The volunteer team, they're doing all the great legwork on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that they did was help competitively select and vet your selected installers. There's a couple of other installers, including John, as well. So they're also just out there on a day-to-day basis helping answer your questions. So if you ever run into one of them, be sure to reach out and thank them. Your installer, like I mentioned, was competitively vetted. They're your technical expert. They're available to provide free site assessments, talk about pricing and ownership options, and they're also a turnkey contractor for you, so they take you from end to end, from contracting through installation and beyond. And you all in the community, folks on the line here today, also play a really important role in this program, because the program is really focused on that grassroots networking effect. So you all get to learn about your opportunities, potentially adopt the technologies, and then also spread the word and talk to your friends and neighbors about the program. So just a brief background on PLUS, like Ellen mentioned, you have multiple technology opportunities under the program. And really where this came out of was just our vision here in order to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet the goals, the very lofty goals of the Global Warming Solution Act in Massachusetts, and thinking about how do we do that with a program like this. And when you take a look at both where the broad spectrum of emissions come from, as well as our individual household energy use, you can actually see that, if you can see here on this bottom pie here, you can see that a significant portion of it comes from space heating and water heating. And we have the technologies on hand with which to manage this, basically. So we've got great technologies like solar hot water. So the benefits of combining these technologies is you can potentially use solar or electricity to heat your home and or hot water. If you can do more than one, you can maximize cost savings, further reduce your carbon footprint, and also gain energy independence, which I think is very valuable at a time like this. And again, like Ellen mentioned, you can receive quotes from multiple technologies under the program, which is not always that common in programs like these. Get rid of that there. So like I mentioned, the program itself is really just designed to answer your questions, get those free site assessments to learn about, okay, how might this look on my home, learn about all the various incentives and programs available specifically for your situation, because every situation is unique. Of course, talk about cost and other types of payment options, other options if one of the technologies isn't feasible. So that's something that John's really going to walk through in just a bit. And, you know, again, like I mentioned, you've got your community volunteers to answer your questions. And, you know, one of the benefits of the program as well is your installer has been vetted and is offering transparent as well as discounted pricing in a very transparent way, so that you can see both the base cost and possible additional cost, or what we might call adders, so that you can learn about everything that goes into the cost of your system, so that you can really see what's going on there. So quick demonstration here on why we think any type of solar technology is powerful is taking a look at world energy use. That's that little circle here on the left-hand side, which is actually quite large. It's 16 terawatt years per year, which is quite a lot. And just visually start taking a look at first how it compares to finite energy reserves. So you can see how many times that circle is going to eat out of those finite energy reserves that of course aren't you know, available to come back. Then you've got a lot of your renewables, and you can start to see how these match up, but certainly a bit smaller, things like wind and hydro and geothermal. And then when we take a look at where solar fits into this picture, you can see that there's a clear answer here. It's an incredibly abundant resource that we certainly don't capture enough of quite yet, but programs like these help you adopt technologies to do so. So that's why we're really excited about solar hot water. So John is going to go into this in a lot more detail, but just on a very high level, solar hot water systems are similar to solar electric, but instead of converting the sun's energy to electricity, of course, it's just converting it to heat. So it's using the thermal energy from the sun. So you've got a solar collector up on your roof, which is going to connect through to your water heater, probably in your basement or something like that. And it's pretty much as simple as that. Again, John will go into in a bit more detail, but it's just on the solar collector, it's heating up that fluid, and it's heating your home's domestic hot water. Typically, these systems can supply 50 to 80% of a home's annual hot water needs as well, so they're very effective. Very quickly on what makes a good solar hot water site, you need space that's available for collectors, which the structure should be capable of supporting them, an open roof area of about 50 square feet or so, or a potential available space for a ground or pole mounted system. Within the home, of course, then space available for a storage tank. Ideally southern exposure, but solar hot water is certainly more tolerant of shade than PV. but solar collectors should certainly still get at least 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. And typically the best payback for sites are those with heating with high cost fossil fuels like oil or propane, or something like electric resistance. Not to say that other ones can't be a good value, but those are certainly some of the best. So very briefly on incentives and programs, just going to give a high-level overview so that John can really dig into both the values, but also what this looks like on a practical application. So the incentives available in Massachusetts, you've got rebates, so these are just direct cash incentives. You've got loan options, so these are financing options to cover the upfront cost of the system. You have something called alternative energy credits. This is an upfront cash payment as well. You've also got tax credits, which is an opportunity to cover your expected tax payment. And of course, this is going to vary on your tax, based on your tax appetite. So high level on the value of some of these, the MassCEC rebate, we offer a rebate, can be anywhere up to from I think probably about 2,000 to upwards of about 45,000. I'm sorry, 4,500, 45,000. That would be crazy. There's also a federal tax credit. You can take off about 26% there, which is quite nice. A state tax credit capped at $1,000. The MassSafe Heat Loan, which John's going to talk about, is a 0% loan that you can have for 7 years for up to $25,000. So this is an incredibly valuable loan that can help folks, and typically this covers the cost of most systems, so that's a really nice opportunity there as well. The credits really varies based on your system, so I'll let John talk about that. And there is also a sales tax exemption. And for the MassCEC rebates, you can get a higher value if you are income qualified. And like I mentioned, the heat loan is typically sufficient to cover the cost of most systems. So quickly with some of the details, you'll get these slides and you'll see you'll see the recording of this. And so I've just offered a few of the direct links so you can see if you really are curious and want to look more into these. So MassSafe Heat Loan, the Solar Hot Water Rebate, and also the North Shore website itself, if you haven't perused it yet, has a lot of these details in significantly more depth. So definitely take a look there, of course, or get in touch with your installer, or of course, someone like Ellen, one of your local volunteers. So with that, just a little bit more contact information. Again, you'll see these slides when the recording goes out, but just want to now take the opportunity to pass it along to John from New England Solar Hot Water. He's your selected hot water installer. So I need to now unshare my screen.
Yeah, choose stop share, and then John will be able to share.
All right.
All right, let me try here.
Perfect.
Let's see if this works. Yeah.
No, don't push play. Yeah. You just want to scroll.
Can't seem to get it to scroll. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. Can you see it all right?
Yep.
All right, here we go. All right, great. Thanks for the intro and thanks for having us. We're really excited. This program's been going for a while and we're excited. It's been great working with people in these 3 towns. It's been a lot of fun. People are really receptive. We got a little interrupted by this coronavirus problem, but we continue to work through it, and everyone has been still receptive. Everyone's at home, focusing on home projects. So I'm glad solar hot water is one of the things people are thinking about. Just a little bit about us. We're a small company. We're just 10 employees. We're local, and been in business for 12 years. We're kind of concentrated on really getting to know every customer. From start to finish. The main principals are my boss, Bruce Dyke, who's the president and owner. He's on every installation. He loves to work with his hands, so he actually is involved in the building of every system that we install. I'm doing marketing and site assessments, and then our main customer interaction is Beverly Jacoby. We haven't been around that long, only 12 years or so, but we've done a lot of work. Over 600 now in residential systems. We also build larger commercial systems. Little smattering of some photos there. You can see, and also some photos later, but you can see how solar hot water kind of takes every different shape and size and can fit almost every building type. How solar hot water works, it's very simple. It's unlike PV where you're converting solar energy to electricity. We're just taking the sun's heat on a surface, an absorber plate, which is kind of like a dashboard of a car in the winter, how hot you know how hot your dashboard can get. So we're not really heating up air, we're actually heating up an absorber plate, the actual surface inside behind the glass of the solar collector. Very simple to understand. Then we just run fluid through it. And these are the type of collectors that are out there right now. There's really two types. Flat plate is the more common. It's been around for quite a long time, since the 60s really, and really got very popular in the 70s. The evacuated tube is a different type. Those are individual glass tubes that are in a vacuum that creates really good insulation value, so it holds heat very well in the wintertime. That's newer technology, but still has equal robust ability, has the same warranty as the flat plate. But they both work on the same principle. The evacuated tubes have a tiny absorber plate that runs the length of the tube with a little pipe attached to it. And the flat plate collectors have a big, large absorber plate behind with multiple pipes that run and absorb the heat. Just want to make the point that solar thermal has been around, quite a long time. As I said, in the 70s was a really exciting time for solar hot water when Jimmy Carter mounted some panels on the White House, soon taken down by Ronald Reagan, but they were there for a little while. But there were quite a few systems installed then, and it really hasn't changed that much since then. The collectors back then were 80–85% efficient. They still are 80–85% efficient. It's just a very simple principle that can't be tweaked much more than it is already. Here we use primarily in the Northeast for domestic hot water, not so much for space heating because of our low winter sun and short days in the wintertime. So it takes quite a few panels to try and make a dent in space heating, so we don't do it too much. We do it sometimes, but not too often. Payback is very quick depending on the backup fuel, and you can see in these two pie charts, it's becoming more and more important. Average homes now, the big red blob is, maybe I can point here, oh yeah. The red blob here is domestic hot water. And maybe 20% or so of the energy use in an average home now. But look how that's changing as these homes get more and more efficient here with a net zero home, for instance, where domestic hot water all of a sudden is becoming almost half the energy load because the space heating load is getting down so low. So it's a good thing to look at to make another dent on your energy footprint. Here's a simple diagram of how a solar hot water system works, kind of like Lisa's diagram. This is a single tank solution. So in this case, we would replace an existing tank and put in a solar storage tank that would have collectors on the roof and glycol water fluid being pumped up cold, coming back hot to a heat exchanger inside the stainless storage tank. Then we'd also have a backup system mainly for wintertime. If there wasn't enough sun or we had a bunch of cloudy days, the backup would kick in. Usually it's an optional integral electric element in the middle of the tank. It would come on if necessary, mainly in wintertime. Or it could also be a coil from a boiler, like any indirect tank, like a lot of people have. So you could have one tank that's heated both by solar, the coil at the bottom, and by the boiler coil in the middle. We also have a drain back tank, so the fluid that's running around in this solar loop actually sits in this tank when the system turns off. So whenever the pump turns off, the fluid drains into this tank. You can see a picture of it here. And And so the collectors are free of fluid and they can't freeze or overheat that way. We also add a mixing valve because we allow the storage tank to get hot, hotter than you would normally use in a house because it's free energy. So the more we can store, the better. It'll last through those cloudy days better. And then as it comes out hot, we mix it with cold before it gets delivered to the fixtures upstairs. This is similar to Lisa's diagram where you have a two-tank solution. If you have an existing tank, we can put the whole solar system here. You can see solar system here with a solar tank heated by the collectors, and then we could send hot water on to whatever the existing system is, whatever conventional system there is. And the existing system would be the backup. So if the water comes out of the solar tank and not warm enough, the existing system would warm it up however it needs to be before delivered to the household fixtures. A look at the tanks we use. These are actually made in Massachusetts. They're stainless steel tanks. They're a very common tank in the Northeast and actually throughout the country for boiler indirect tanks. They make a solar version with that solar heat exchanger at the bottom. They're actual lifetime warranty tanks. So as long as the homeowner is in the house, the tank is warranted. For the line set piping between tank and collectors, we use it actually comes packaged. It's a corrugated stainless steel pre-insulated piping that can go wrap around corners and through difficult spaces. And then as we go, usually we install on the outside with this line set piping, so it's very similar to air conditioning piping, and we'll cover it. You can see the penetration here. We can go into a roof and then come out or down through the house in closets. As we come out, we usually cover the piping in a PVC cover, and that comes in different colors so it can match the house, or it can be painted as well. This is kind of the brains of the system. On the left is the controller. This comes with every system. It has a little window on it, and you can push buttons and take a look at what's happening in the system, what the temperature is. Up in the collectors, the temperature at top and bottom of the tank, and what's happening any moment. Also has a real simple green light on it that if it turns red, you know to call us. Otherwise, everything's operating properly. You can also go a step further and add on the right, a data logger and online monitoring where you can really look at the system live at any time, and also create a history showing the amount of energy that you are producing and using on a day-by-day basis. The maintenance on these systems, because of the drain back function that I was describing, is really minimal. Those collectors are empty at night. They're empty when the tank is fully hot, so they can't really overheat or freeze. That's kind of a problem with some of the pressurized systems in the past. So we found that they really take almost no maintenance. Our warranty is 4 years, soup to nuts, labor and materials. As I said, the tanks, I have a lifetime warranty, and the collectors and line set are 10 years. Basic maintenance is to take a look at the solar fluid every 5 to 7 years, just make sure there's enough there and the glycol hasn't broken down. And then those little pumps, sometimes after 10 years or so, they can run out 10 to 15 years. So that's an easy replacement any plumber can do. System's basically expected to last 20, 25 years, and they do. We're just now taking down some systems installed in Jimmy Carter years that have worked that long, so 1979, early 80s. These are the incentives that Lisa was talking about. Just another slide, same thing. The alternative energy certificates, the first one is basically another version of what was also offered for PV systems. It's a way for the utility companies to pay you to add your system to their renewable energy portfolio. And it really depends a lot on your system and how much energy it produces. But we handle all the paperwork. It's just a couple of pages that the owner needs to fill out. And then these alternative energy certificates are minted, what they call, and then sold. It's a one-time sale, and it's a one-time cash payment to the customer. And then the MassCEC rebate, that also depends on the size of the system and the type of collectors. It's offered for solar hot water systems, and then there are also adders depending on whether you have solar PV as well, whether you opt for the online metering, and whether or not you qualify for moderate income. The heat loan financing that Lisa mentioned, 0% interest, no better deal around. I think half our customers opt for this. It's very simple. You do have to go to a bank to close a loan, but not a lot of paperwork involved. It's usually a 7-year loan, and so you can pay off that upfront cost with a monthly payment, and oftentimes cover it with your savings. Federal tax credit, same as for solar PV. This year, 26% of the system cost. That's going down next year to 22%, and then is supposed to be eliminated by the following year. So now's a good time to look at this. And then the Massachusetts tax incentive, up to $1,000 per system. Here's some numbers on a typical system, family of 4. You can see, I won't go into too much detail, but you can see this is 3 collectors, an 80-gallon tank, around $9,000 for a system price. After these 4 incentives that I just talked about, you can see a net cost in the $2,500 range, $2,500 to $3,000. That's typical for a family of 4. And these little systems, just those 3 collectors, actually produce quite a bit of energy. Saving, if you have an oil, let's say you have an oil boiler producing hot water now, you'll end up saving about 167 gallons of oil. So that's a pretty good cash on cash return. And in terms of CO2, it's even better. So a little system like this is really equivalent to the savings of a 1.5 acre deciduous forest, actually. So it's amazing the punch that they provide. For moderate income, the numbers even improve even better. You can see same pricing here. The rebate goes up considerably for moderate income, and so your net cost gets down below $1,000. So the return is quite good. And I just want to mention that multifamily properties, if you own an investment apartment or a 2-family house, or up to 3 or 4 families, the numbers are even better, because not only do you have those incentives that I described, but you also have what's called accelerated depreciation. This is for all solar systems, which adds a really great additional benefit. And of course, if you do a 2 or 3 family, you can have one system serving 2 or 3 units. So you don't have to have 2 or 3 different systems. So there's not a lot of replication of elements. You might have one large tank. This one, for instance, is 4 collectors and one large 120-gallon tank. So it doesn't cost, for a 2-family, it doesn't cost twice as much as a single family, as you can see here, but you get all the same benefits and all the same oil savings or whatever backup fuel you have. Here, 4 collectors here is equivalent to almost 2.5 acre forest. Some pretty pictures. For solar hot water, we don't need a lot of roof area, so we can usually squeeze in and find a spot for our collectors. You can see a few options here. The collectors can go vertical, horizontal. They come in different sizes. And so usually find something, as Lisa said, you don't have to face due south. You don't really lose a lot of energy if you go even all the way to due west or due east. But we do like to tilt them somewhat if possible, because we like to get that winter sun when the sun's low, to get as much production as we can in the wintertime. Summer is no problem. We always provide plenty for summer and most of spring and fall, but to get that winter sun, the slight tilt towards 45 degrees or so is helpful. You can also do lots of creative ways of mounting collectors because there's just a couple or three. We can mount is awning style, as you can see here, the upper left, which is sometimes really nice for windows that get too much sun. You can have kind of a passive solar device as well as collecting thermal energy. And we can also mount on north-facing roofs. You can see here, someone has PV on their south-facing roof. We mounted on the north-facing roof and just tilted them towards south. This is something we do, which in some cases it's in a spot where you really can't see them from the street, so they work really well. This other one on the left, this is in Beacon Hill. Again, we found a spot where in a historic district where we found a spot where collectors could be mounted where they couldn't be seen from the street. So it passed the Historic Commission. We have quite a few customers that do both. If you have an existing PV system, we usually find a spot. We can find a spot for the solar hot water collectors next to or behind. Here you see on the north-facing roof. Sometimes people ask, well, if I'm doing PV, would I also want to do solar hot water? And my answer is always, if you have enough roof space for extra PV panels, you could do electric hot water heating and add PV panels. They would take a lot more space than the solar hot water panels, so you need to have plenty of roof space. For instance, this system here on the upper left, if they wanted to supply the same amount of energy as these two solar thermal collectors, they'd need maybe 3 times more roof space than those take to create the same amount of energy. So if you're putting in a new PV system and you have plenty of roof space, it's worth looking at adding PV panels to cover hot water. But if you already have a PV system, it's usually not economical to add PV panels to cover hot water. It makes more sense to go with solar thermal. Multifamily I was talking about, I just want to show a few photos. Again, 3 or 4 panels cover a 2 or 3 family house. It doesn't take a lot of roof space. You can see here, this family had PV all over their south-facing roof, so they put panels on their garage, and we piped to a tank which preheated both units in the house. This one in Cambridge is in Historic District. From here you can see them well, but from the street you can't, so that passed and was accepted. And then we can also do roof mount on flat roof, tilt them up, which is very common for commercial systems. Some small commercial systems, just give you an idea. If you know anybody with a commercial building that uses hot water or pool or exercise club or dormitory. This is a Harvard dormitory we mounted on some existing skylight roofs. We can mount, here's an apartment building where we mount awning mount again. Condo building, small condo building. And we do very large commercial systems as well. Up to 60, 100 units. Same idea, it's just more collectors and a much bigger tank, but same idea with heat exchanger, and same idea as a residential system. Customers seem pretty happy. We have quite a few customers. I love some of these quotes. I love the this one here. I can actually use the bathtub. We find that we are plumbers, so when we're there putting in a solar hot water system, a lot of times there are issues with the existing plumbing system, and we try to make any other kind of repairs to make sure that customers are happy when we leave. I put this in today, coronavirus. We're doing, I have a few protocols that we're following. Our site assessments, we can do either virtual, I can send pictures or do FaceTime, or we're also doing exterior only where we come by and just stay outside the home and get everything we need from FaceTime or photos from inside the home and stay outside. For installations, we're mainly on the roof or in the basement, so we pretty much staying out of the inhabited area. If we try to reduce that as much as possible, we don't let our workers, if they're feeling sick, come on, social distancing. And we try to disinfect all the control devices before we leave so that they're clean for the customer's use, although they don't really need to be touched once we leave. It's all meant to run on its own without user interaction. And that is all I have.
Thank you, John. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat and I can read them for you. Or if it's going to be not destructive, I could unmute you and you can ask your question yourself. So I'll give it a minute here and see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to just type them right into either the chat or the Q&A box and we'll get to them. There is one question, John, about you had mentioned, or it was either you or Lisa mentioned, if you didn't have roof space, there was the availability of some kind of ground or pole mount for collectors. Mm-hmm. Could you speak to that at all?
Yes, we've done a few ground mounts, not a pole mount. Poles are expensive, so we tend to come up with a fairly inexpensive framing for a ground mount. The most challenging part of a ground mount system is the buried line set between the collectors and wherever the tank's going to be located. Just depends on.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, between if the collectors are mounted on the ground, tilted up somewhere, 50 yards from the house, somewhere in a field, we have to run pipes between them and where the storage tank is, usually in the basement. So the trenching for that can be challenging depending on, the particular yard and rocks and all that. It doesn't have to be deep. It is glycol, so it doesn't have to be a deep trench. It only needs to be 8 or 12 inches because there's no freezing involved. And it can be a long trench, long pipe run. We've run as far as 200 feet plus. Just all we do is increase the size of the pump. Yeah, I think we've done 10 or 12 of those. And obviously, if you have a great spot, it sometimes works better than the roof because you can find a spot that gets sun all day long. So.
Mm-hmm. And this is not a storage capacity. So this is truly a production and usage on a regular basis situation. This is not storage, correct? The collectors and solar hot water?
Right. Yeah, it stores. The tank is kind of like a battery in a way, but it. So we want to heat up. That's why the tank is larger than what people are used to with their hot water tank. So it's a little bit larger because we want to store as much heat as we can to last through cloudy days. But it doesn't store. If the sun wasn't out for a month, you'd lose it all. So it doesn't store forever. So yeah, it's storage, but it's a temporary storage.
Okay.
There have been some people that tried to install humongous buried tanks to try and collect thermal energy in the fall to get them through the winter, and I haven't seen it done successfully so far.
How big are those collectors as compared to what might be a normal sized solar panel for PV installation?
Yeah, they're a little bit larger. I think PV panel might be something like 2.5 by 5 or so. Ours are 4 by 8 is our standard size, so that's the size of a door or a plywood panel. We also have smaller ones that are 4 by 6.5. And the evacuated tubes come in all different sizes. You can have as many tubes as you want, so you can make them larger or smaller depending on the number of tubes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for an 80-gallon tank and
Mm.
1,800 square foot house with 4 people, about how many collectors would you need?
Either 2 of the large ones or 3 of the smaller ones. So that picture behind me now, I think that's 2 of the larger ones. And that would be a family of 4. That would be fine. Yeah. Sometimes 3 of the smaller ones, they're a little more area. If the roof isn't perfectly oriented, you know, maybe get some shade or there's some other issues, and we might do 3 of the smaller ones.
And is it the number of collectors that is the factor in how much energy you can store in the tank, or is it the tank itself, or is it a combination of the 2?
It's kind of a combination. It's, you know, it's square footage area of the collector. So when the sun's out, the more square footage area you have, the more energy you're going to store in that tank. Now the tank can only go so far, though. We can't go beyond, you know, a certain temperature because of warranty issues. We go up to maybe 140 degrees or something. Once that tank reaches 140 degrees, the system shuts off. Even if you have plenty of sun all afternoon, you don't want to overheat it. So so then that'll last, you know, a full tank of 140 degree water is going to last 3 or 4 days for a family of 4, even with no sun at all. So usually spring, summer, and fall, the backup system won't have to be utilized at all, mostly. In the winter, late fall, early spring, winter time, the backup might be used, you know, 50 to 60% of the time.
Okay. And so it is critical that if your single tank system, just so I can understand and make it clear to our listeners, it's the single tank system that has the internal backup built in with the coil or however you've described it, whereas the dual tank system is one where you have an existing hot water tank and this will connect to it and end up using the existing tank as a backup. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So single tank is backed up either by an electric element or by your boiler, connection to your boiler. 2-tank solution is you just leave your existing tank in place. We send solar heated water to it. We basically divert the cold water feed to the existing tank. From there, it goes through the solar tank and then back, so that existing tank receives hot water instead of cold water. And
is the primary benefit for those with oil or electric as a fuel source right now because of the cost of, say, gas?
Yeah, well, CO2 wise, if you're just looking at that, the benefit is equally good with gas.
Right.
But if you're looking at just pure dollars, yeah, because gas is so inexpensive, the payback is maybe 7 to 8 years on one of our systems, as opposed to with propane or electric or oil, it's more between 3 and 5 year payback on the system investment.
Okay. Yeah. Lisa, did you have any questions or comments from something we might have missed and from some of the questions that we just had? I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good run through. I think that covered most of the things we typically hear questions on.
Well, let me see if there's any more questions. Hang on, let me open up another screen. I don't see any more questions here. John, how can people reach you?
Well, on that slide there, if you can still see it, it has our email addresses. I don't have my phone number on there, but we do have our main phone number at the bottom there, and Bev can send you my way. But you may drop me an email anytime, and I'll be happy to get in touch and talk about possible site assessment.
Excellent. Yeah, and again, if you're listening to this webinar and you have a site visit before May 31st, you will get a $50 gift card. And if you sign a contract by May 31st, you will get a $100 gift card. And that's outside of the installers. That's something that the Solarize program has put together for you. So if you're at all curious, there's really no risk way of getting a professional assessment for solar hot water for your home or business. So I really encourage you to try and do that, especially before May 31st, when this program will be over. And you have the, the transparent pricing from your installers who have been vetted by a lot of people from Salem, Swampscott, and Nahant. And I don't see any more questions. Let's see, do I have any more questions? I don't think so. It's really fascinating. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us tonight, both you and Lisa. I really appreciate everything that you're doing for these towns, and this is really great. Thanks so much for being here tonight and for providing this service.
Thank you, Ellen. We have to thank you so much for, I don't know if folks know you're a volunteer, but this is very
I'm a volunteer.
commendable of you. Thank you.
Yep. Endless thanks to the volunteers.
Yeah.
And help them spread the word.
Yes, definitely help us spread the word. This is really fascinating. It's great for the environment. It's really interesting technology. And we've got, the professionals here who, you can trust, we've had so many people vet them. They've been through it. So these are the real deal people who know what they're doing. So we want to encourage you to get in contact. So, all right. I think that's going to be it for tonight. This will be on solarizenorthshore.org in the next day or two. Feel free to email me, ellenshannagoldberg@gmail.com. And have a great night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.